The Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and I'm fired up today because I got my man, my good friend, dude, where's your plug, Captain J. Carson. This guy, I know I say it with, I have so many, fishy friends, but Jay is legit. Jay is the man in the Big Bend region out of Perry. I've got a lot of friends up there too, and we're gonna have Evan on the show. We're gonna have a couple of guys up on the show, but Jay and I have been fishing together for a while, and actually, I met Jay through through the Captain's Collective podcast with Hunter, and he had this incredible story. He was talking about just how great the fishing is in his area, and as soon as I got done with that listening to that podcast, I reached out to Hunter and I was like, I need Jay's number. I need to contact him. I want to go fishing right now. And so we've been good friends ever since. We've recorded a couple episodes together. Jay, welcome to the show, man. How are you? It's spring break time. You've been fishing some?
Dude, I've been super busy this week. I would have been even more busier if we hadn't had the weather that we've had the last 2 days. But first, I just want to thank you for bringing me on tonight, and we're gonna talk and hang out and have a good time, talk about our fishery and talk about a little bit of what I do on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, man, I've been getting after it this week. Pretty much since you were up, I've been super busy. You came up a couple weeks ago. We did the Redfish camp together with Captain's Collective and Drifter Fish Club, and it has been pretty much nonstop ever since then. The only breaks I've been taking is when we get these awful weather windows. I don't know how it's been for you, Jonathan, but up here, it's been, our decent days have been few and far between here in the last month or so. So. Yeah. But yeah, man, getting after it and doing a bunch of fishing and putting people on fish. And we can talk, a lot about it as we go throughout the show tonight.
Yeah. Well, as we're recording this, it's tomorrow is, what is it? St. Patrick's Day. I went blank for a second. My kids are all excited. It's been the last month. I feel like January was really cold. Then February, we've got warm spells. The bass started spawning. Tarpon started showing up in my area, but then we got these cold fronts, and in between the cold fronts, tons of wind, nonstop wind. I was supposed to have a charter yesterday. It actually worked out in my favor, and we'll get into that in a second. Well, we'll just get into it. We were filming on Friday, offshore down in Naples, and I didn't get home until 5:45 a.m. And the reason is because I stopped at a rest stop and slept for a couple hours. I was just dying. I was so tired. I've been up almost 24 hours straight, and offshore for 14, 15 of those hours, I was spent. And by the grace of God, man, it was windy yesterday.
Yes.
When we got inshore, finally got back to the marina, I looked at the weather. I called my client, and I was like, man, a couple days ago, it was supposed to be slicked out. But now it's going to be gusting in the low 30s. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And there's, not spending a ton of time up in your area until Redfish camp. You're in this very similar situation as me with you have a north or a south wind, you run out of places to go.
Right.
And then there's the idea of, well, there are places I can go and hide from the wind. But then you run into, for you, especially in your area, is there going to be water in those places?
Right.
And then the other thought is, can we get to those places safely?
Right.
So the wind can be really, man, it can make things really difficult, especially for us in little boats fishing big water, trying to get to the flats. So yeah, I'm ready for the hot temps. I'm ready for the slicked out days, and you're praying for just the breeze to cool off a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's talk specifically about where you are. People who don't know the region that you fish in. Where are you located? Where do you?
So I live in Perry, Florida, but I fish a pretty broad stretch of coastline. I would say I fished an area from about Horseshoe Beach all the way north to the St. Mark's area. There's a I don't quite make it that far. There's a little river called the Osceola River before you get to the St. Marks, and that's kind of the very northern reaches of my fishery. That's predominantly where I spend, my time, in my fishery, fishing that little stretch of coastline. Um, I'd say probably 80% of my year is spent in that little stretch. So,
Awesome. Did you grow up in that area?
I did not grow up here. My wife grew up here, and so that's kind of how I wound up here. I moved down here about 2002.
Wow, but
I'm from
20 plus years of
from
fishing that
Central
area.
Florida, Winter Haven, Polk County. So that's where kind of my family's from. I grew up living a little bit of everywhere. But I wound up settling here in 2002, graduated from Florida State, met my wife, stuck in the area. And then we just made Perry our home. We're raising our kids here. And I love spending my time in this fishery just because, it doesn't have it's not an easily accessible fishery. There's a lot of hazards that you can encounter in this fishery. There's a lot of shallow waters. So if you don't know where you're going or where you're running, you can get yourself into trouble. In fact, the other day, running out, I had launched one of our smaller rivers here, and there wasn't a whole lot going on in the river. So it was just a matter of if I could get out, on the flats from the mouth of the river. And yeah, I got a little impatient, which you never want to do, trying to get in a little bit of a hurry. And I busted. I didn't completely knock my skeg off, but I took a good chunk of my skeg off running about 25 miles an hour on big rock patch. Water was slightly blown out. We had a little north wind. It wasn't a strong north wind, but it doesn't take much of a wind to actually reduce the amount of water that we have. And it was just a little less than I thought there was. And I thought I was good, and I was not. So fortunately, it was fine. Not busted a little bit of the skeg off. Didn't do any significant damage. So we just kept on rolling fish the rest of our day and had a great day. So,
Yeah.
but that's just one of the, things that you've got to take into consideration up here, because there are a lot of hazards and there's a lot of wildlife management area. It's not heavily populated. There's not a lot of, accessible boat ramps that we can use. So it keeps the boat traffic down, and it keeps our fishery in really good shape.
Yeah. Well, to touch on our first episode, we got out there and man, fish was my first time experiencing it. And I remember driving in and I'm thinking, if I ever bring my wife up here, that's it. It's over. She's gonna be like, sell the house or move it up here. This place is awesome. And it is. It's beautiful. And I just drove up that way, filming with TJ Saunders, Captain TJ Saunders, who's actually our camera boat operator that day.
Yeah, he
second,
was. Yeah,
second, second
the
episode.
second time we filmed, he was the camera
Yeah,
operator.
he was
Yeah.
camera bait. But anyways, the amount of deer I saw on the road was unbelievable, and it's because there is so much undeveloped area, and
Right.
that's I mean, you get off of I-75 going north, and you get on these little backcountry roads, and you're passing through these towns like Cross City, Chiefland, and dude, I fell in love with it.
Yeah,
It's a different speed,
it
and
is.
I'm so used to angry, aggressive, honking drivers, and you get up there, and it's just a bunch of good old people, you
Yeah,
know. And I loved it, man. I absolutely loved visiting your area. And we got out on the water, and you're finding clean water, you're finding turtle grass, you're finding creeks and creek mouths. You have a tide flow, which I am totally not used to, but then that sets the stage for water flushing out of these creeks, which means the bait's going to flush out of these creeks, which means the fish are going to stage in certain areas. And if you can time all that right, paying attention to the tide, you can catch a ton of fish.
yeah,
And then on the opposite, you're not fishing the creek mouse anymore. You're backing up and you're fishing a little bit deeper because that water is gone in those creeks and it's forcing you to now push out because the fish are pushed out.
right.
And then now you're fishing in deeper water, 3, 4 feet of water, but around the grass and finding these rock piles. And I was really blown away by that first visit. And then we go up there again in our second episode, and we're just going to touch on it briefly, but the second episode, you're like, dude, we got a cold front coming. It's going to get windy. Like, we only got like 2 hours
Yeah.
tops.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't care. I'm going fishing with Captain J. Carson. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to crush it, man.
Yeah.
I had literally no fear whatsoever, no stress, which isn't always the
Well, I'm
case.
glad I'm glad you didn't have any fear because I was a little bit stressed out that morning, just hoping that we were, the weather would cooperate enough for us to get where we needed to be and
And it
catch the
did.
fish. But
And it worked out beautifully.
yeah, it did.
And we're up there. I've learned. I pay attention. And if the guy I'm fishing with, it's his home waters, your water. If you are throwing a certain lure, right?
Right.
Every time, and it happens every time. You're like, Jonathan, you should throw X, and I'm going to throw Y. And I'm watching Y is working a whole lot better than X. And it don't
Yeah.
take long, buddy.
Yeah.
It don't take long for me to switch.
Yeah, that
But
first
both,
episode we were filming, we it was kind of more of a redfish episode, and nothing against paddle tails. And you started out throwing a paddle tail. I was like, man, I think you should probably throw a gold spoon.
yeah.
And so I whacked the fish immediately on a gold spoon and broke it off. And then you did catch one on the paddle tail, but then I
Yeah.
started whacking them one after another on a gold spoon. And you're like, you know what? I think I'm just going to put
Give
this
me one
gold
of them.
spoon on.
I ain't stupid. I want to catch a fish. And it's funny is, I've caught more fish on that DOA paddle tail, that Cal shad
Right.
tail,
Right.
than anything. So it's hard for me to walk away from that.
For sure. That's your confidence bait.
But you know what? If in certain regions, if certain areas, if something's working,
Right.
man, you can totally catch fish on that paddle tail up in your area.
Yeah.
But there's something about a gold spoon.
Yeah.
There is something in your area about a gold spoon. Now,
There is.
you were a fan. We got 30 seconds. You were a fan of the Aqua Dream, and I bought a couple at Redfish Camp, but then I bought some of those Johnson Sprites,
Johnson's.
which I grew up using not the Sprite, the Silver Minnow.
Right.
And I was throwing those, and I caught just as many, if not more, on that
Yeah.
than the Aqua Dreams. And they're a little bit
I think
cheaper.
I think really it's just the spoon itself. It's what
Yeah.
you prefer. They're going to bite both.
Well, hey, this is Captain Jonathan Moss and the Captain's Log Radio. We are coming up on our first break. More when we get back here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and I got Captain J. Carson with me. Dude, where's your plug? The man is absolutely on fire. But before we get back into talking fishing, I just want to remind you, hey, I want to connect with you on social media at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's where I post daily. Post videos, I post pictures, I post reels, I post all of our radio stuff. Once it airs on the Outdoor Radio Network, it'll get blasted out to YouTube. You can watch it or you can listen to it on YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart. So however you guys want to ingest this content, hit me up. Let's connect. Like, subscribe, follow on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Captain's Log TV. Jay, we were talking about gold spoons. And in your area, it just seems like that is a hot bait, man. That is like a go-to. And it's interesting on day 2 of the Redfish camp, I had Bo with me, and we got out to a deeper area, and we were looking for some trout, waiting for that tide to get right for the redfish to start tailing. And he was throwing a spoon, and I was throwing that DOA paddle tail, and we were whacking the trout. I mean, they didn't seem to care. And another popping cork, DOA popping cork would have been killer there too.
Yeah.
Deadly combo. That'd been great to see a lot of guides in that area using that.
Yeah, that's
but we-
predominant. I would say that's the predominant rig in our area. To be honest with you, Jonathan, I hate popping cork fishing. It's one of my least favorite things to do. I'll do it out of necessity. when it's the dog days of summer and nothing else is really working. But
Yeah.
if I can catch them another way, I'm gonna try to catch them another way.
Yeah, well, that's what we use the spoon and the paddle tail for those trout, but in the afternoons when the tide was right up in those creeks, man, it was hard to beat a gold spoon.
Yeah,
Every every redfish during redfish camp except for one was caught on a gold spoon.
yeah, yeah. Now let me ask you something. Are you a straight retrieve gold spoon guy?
So I wasn't until we pre-fished. So before redfish camp, let's get into redfish camp. Um, Redfish Camp was through the Drifter Fish Club, Captain's Collective podcast. Hunter Levine, he hosts that, and he started the Drifter Club with a couple other guys. And the Redfish Camp was up in the Steenhatchee area. It was in Steenhatchee, which is in the Big Bend area of Florida. And Jay invited me to come up to be a guide for that. There was 5 guides in total, and we had an absolute blast. So I don't guide that area, and of course, these clients are paying good money to get out on the water and to catch fish. The last thing I wanted to do was go out blind and guide people blind and
Sure,
not know an area. That's not respectful to the client.
sure, absolutely.
That's not being a good steward of them and their time and their money. So I got out with Jay and Evan Snow, Captain Evan Snow, and those guys were just incredible and able to show me some spots and put down some tracks. Because the last thing I wanted to do was crash into something and blow out the lower unit on the new Kaio, and we're still
Yeah,
in the middle of filming. And so
yeah,
I got out with Jay and we went to some areas, and we saw those rocks, and it was
yeah.
it was interesting. I was expecting, I don't know, big rocks and big like boulders, but it was really like this flat rock
Right,
that had grass growing on it, and the grass on it was completely different than the grass around it.
right.
It was very, very unique.
Yeah, and if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would just think it's part of the rest of the turtle grass bottom or part of the grassy bottom. Now there's some very distinct rock patches like when you
But with
came up and fished with Evan and I, and we found all those trout that
with
were just
trout,
laid up on that big rock slab
yeah,
and around it. But yeah, but a lot of the rocks are kind of blend in very very well. So
very well. So where we found the trout, this, I want to be honest, Jay. Like when I find schools of trout, they're schoolie trout. They're 10 to 15 inches. And
right,
you'll find, if you find a group of them, usually cold winter days in deeper water on a drop off, but they're all 10 to 15 inches. And you can catch 20 of them.
right,
But this particular day we were scouting, there was every fish we saw in these schools of trout, and we're talking schools of 10 to 20 fish swimming around the flat in a foot and a half of water, crystal clear water, and they were all giants,
big ones.
big
Yeah,
fish.
big ones. They were a little. That day we had bright blue, sunny skies, and it was really calm, and so they were a little tricky to get to bite and to get to stay close to the boat. But we did wind up catching a few that day. But
Yeah.
yeah, as far as with the conditions that we had, if we'd had a little bit more breeze or a little overcast, we probably wouldn't be able to see them as better. But they probably bit a little bit better that day specifically.
But what a unique, sight to see these
Oh, it was incredible.
giant
Yeah,
trout all
yeah,
schooled up together. And we're not talking like one or two schools. It was like everywhere we went,
right.
there was big trout all around. But we were talking about straight retrieving a spoon. I twitch. I'm a twitcher. I not a tweaker, a twitcher.
Twitcher.
And when I use that paddle tail, I like twitching it. I like popping it. I use a Rapala jerk bait a lot. I got one right
Yeah,
here. This one's actually broken. Um, the lip is missing, but I use a Rapala jerk bait a lot or bass fishing, and you
right.
have to twitch it. So when I'm grabbing a spoon, it's hard for me not to twitch it because that's what I do. But Jay was saying, hey, listen, straight retrieve. Don't twitch it. There's just something about the motion of the spoon is already putting out enough vibration and enough flash. So when you do that straight retrieve, It looks good. What do you have? Tell me more about that. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have people who will get on the boat and I'll put a spoon in their hands. And most people that I've had on my boat have fished a spoon at some point in their lives. It's kind of it's a very popular saltwater bait, specifically for redfish and other fish as well too. But a lot of them want to reel, and as they're reeling, they want to give it a pop or two as they're doing, and they'll do that, and I'll know there's fish around, and sometimes it takes me showing them that, hey, I'm going to make this cast, watch me just straight retrieve it, and then when I get the bite and they don't, then I've converted so many people over to that straight retrieve. I have no idea why it works better, but as far as the speed goes, usually I fish a gold spoon, in 2.5 to 4 feet of water, and I'm always, if I'm in pretty shallow water, you got to work pretty hard to keep that spoon from getting stuck on the bottom. But if I'm in 3 to 4 feet of water, I like to try to keep that spoon 1.5 to 2 feet below the water level. So like from the surface of the water. So whatever speed that is, for the spoon size, whether it's a 1/4 ounce or 3/8, or sometimes you might even throw a half ounce spoon, trying to keep that spoon moving. And then that seems to trigger the redfish to want to eat it. I don't know why that is. They like it moving. And in fact, when we filmed your second episode, I don't know if you remember this, but when we caught a ton of trout on top water, and then we went up on that bar, had that crab boat come by that blew off those redfish off that bar, and I was like, well, let's go to this other bar. Let's try to catch some redfish. And I switched over a gold spoon. And you were still throwing that paddle tail, but I think I told you, I said, if you want to try to select more for redfish, even throwing a paddle tail, just that steady retrieve, just that steady swimming, that steady retrieve. Something about that seems to trigger that redfish bite a little bit better. I don't know why, but it does.
Do you prefer a spoon with a J hook or a treble hook?
J hook.
Me too.
Just because it's so much easier on the fish.
Yeah.
That if that fish eats a that spoon pretty deep, usually it's easier to get it out. If he eats that treble hook and he gets all three trebles and the crushers back there, that's a good chance that fish isn't going to make it. Makes my life a whole lot easier dehooking fish as a guide.
Yes.
And then it's a lot easier on the fish themselves as well.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Another thing with spoons that I prefer, a lot of the spoons have a split ring. Some don't. The Johnson Sprites or the Silver Minnow do not. But I'm trying to show you, if you can have a split ring and
a swivel.
That's what I was going to say. Adding a swivel, because sometimes they don't come with a swivel. If you can add a swivel, that can make all the difference. And here's why. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would say here's why. A spoon rotates, it spins in the water. So when you have a direct connection, now your braid or whatever line you're using is going to twist and spin every single cast. But if you have that swivel, your line is going to return back to the reel flat, normal, regular, not twisted, but it still allows the spoon to do exactly what it's supposed to do, turn and swivel and make all kinds of commotion. But having that swivel on that split ring, game changer. Game changer.
Oh, for sure.
Especially if you're using braid, which I'm a braid user.
That's all I use is braid. There's so many reasons for it, but yeah, braid is in salt water. You're just putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're not using braid in salt water.
Yeah, I think especially if you're like us and you fish a lot of structure, and of course I'm adding a fluorocarbon leader. I typically have some right here beside me, but I took it, put it in my truck. I like using fluorocarbon leader. It gives you that, it's clear, it disappears in the water, whereas braid doesn't disappear in the water. So that gives you some buffer from your lure, to your main line to help fish not see your line. But I am definitely a braid fan. It's a little more expensive, but it's worth it. And for guys like us who our job is that put people on fish and they have to get the fish in the boat. We want to do everything we possibly
Well,
can to make
and also
sure.
you may have
Yeah.
somebody that has, never casted a spin rod before, or never been saltwater fishing, and any advantage you can give them, um, distance casting wise, just being able to cover more water, because that's one of the huge keys to being able to catch more fish, is just the ability to cover more water in your casts.
Yeah.
That is going to help them get the bait out farther than
And
they would
that
otherwise.
that happens because thin diameter line. That
Hmm.
braid has as much, if you're looking at, like, I use a 15-pound braid, well, it's got the diameter of like 5-pound mono, but it
Right.
goes so much stronger and it goes far. Well, listen, we are quickly coming to the end of this second segment. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Captain Jay Carson with me. This is the Captain's Log Radio Network. Don't go anywhere, because we got more to talk about right here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Captain Jay Carson with me. Dude, where's your plug? Dude, where's your fly charters? What is the exact
Plug and
name
fly
of it?
charters.
Plug and fly charters.
Yeah, if
There
you're
it
looking
is.
for me on social media or whatever, it's plug and fly charters. Yep.
Perfect. Well, let's talk about Redfish Camp. We have kind of flirted with Redfish Camp, but let's actually talk about it.
Yeah.
Redfish Camp was up in Steenhatchee with the Drifter Club. We mentioned that earlier. We had 10 guys, clients who were there, guys from all over the Southeast. Most were from Florida, but some from Georgia, some from Puerto Rico. Guys were from everywhere in the Southeast. It's great. And a great group of guys of all ages. I know there was a guy from like Tennessee or Alabama. Like, people came from all over. We had a couple of guys cooking. Chip Levine crushed the
Big
cooking.
Chip. Oh, Big Chip
Yeah.
was the man.
Oh my goodness. And then we had 5 guides: Evan Snow, Justin Anderson, Jay Carson, me, and then Josh. What's Josh's last name? I'm going
Josh
blank.
Wells.
Josh Wells. That's right.
Wells Guide
Uh,
Service. Yep.
and we had an absolute blast. And like I said earlier, I had never fished the area, so I got out with Jay and with Evan a week before to pre-fish. And the area we went out of, the bay, is called Dead Man's Bay, which, let me tell
Appropriately
you,
named.
dude, yes,
Yes,
that
it's
is,
appropriately named.
when you're not from an area and you're gonna fish. I called my wife. I was like, "Hey, just to let you know where I'm at. So, I'm gonna be fishing out of Dead Man's Bay." And she goes, "Excuse me?" I said, "Yes, Dead Man's Bay." She goes, "Why is it called that?" I'm like, "I'm gonna find out. I hope I don't find out, but we're gonna find out." It
Yeah, you
got
found out when you
rough.
were running in the afternoons when that wind kicked up against that river tide. Yeah,
Goodness.
yeah, it's
Every
rough.
afternoon, it got nasty, bro.
Yeah,
Very nasty. And I was
yeah.
fishing, between 7 and 10 miles away, depending if I went north or south. And it was bumpy. It was
Got rough.
sketchy. It was
Yeah,
it
it
was
got
rough.
sketchy for sure. Yeah,
And it's I'm fine. I run a boat every day. But when you have clients who aren't used to that, dude,
yeah, yeah.
it can be a bit I don't know, nasty for them. So we took our time. We got in safely, of course. But the idea was redfish and redfish on fly.
Right.
Not everybody threw fly, but
Nope.
that was the main objective, was redfish on fly. And we mentioned Bo earlier; he had never caught a redfish on fly. The first day, I had a couple of guys. One had never caught a redfish on fly. Um, so we get out there that first morning, and it's beautiful. The guys had Chip and the cooking team had packed breakfast and lunch for us. There's a guide house and a client house. The client house ate breakfast there. All the guides got on the water first thing and got everything prepped and ready. And we helped each other out, getting the boats in and out of the water. And we all tied up at one marina. And I loved that, man.
Yeah, it was
I don't
it was
fish
a
out of
great
a
vibe.
marina. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was something special about that. We're all
Yeah.
tied up together. We're all just kind of amped up, ready to go, and excited about our morning. And there was camaraderie, yet there was competition. Not an unhealthy competition, but we're gonna get out there and we're gonna push as hard as we can today to give these clients just the utmost experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And that first day, man, I got into a bunch of tails first thing. And one of my guys, and I'm going blank on names. It's been a busy couple of weeks, but
You had
one of my
Dewan that
guys,
day, right? Didn't you have
I
Dewan
had
and
Dewan and the guy from Puerto Rico. I'm going blank all of a sudden.
Bobby?
Bobby, that's right. Bobby had never seen a tailing redfish, and Dewan had eagle eyes. So I'm up on the platform, and before I'd even say there's a redfish, he'd be like, "Hey, what's that over there, Cat?" I'm like, "That's a redfish tailing, man." I was literally seeing it at the same time, and
Yeah.
so we were just scanning around, and Bobby couldn't see one, and finally, like there was groups, there was lots of tails, and Bobby was just
Right.
like, "Whoa, whoa, this is crazy."
Yeah.
And we got into some fish that were just, they didn't want to eat. They were very,
Yeah.
very.
Yeah,
Did you have
they
that
were
same
they were like
experience?
that all weekend too. For some reason, when they were in their shallow, kind of doing their thing, they were not very cooperative. Fly had to be in the perfect spot. You had to find the right fish. It was very very frustrating. As being a guide can get frustrating sometimes, and you just want your guys on the bow of your boat to have an opportunity and be successful. And when the fish
Yeah.
are acting like that, it gets, you can kind of get discouraged a little bit.
Well,
And they definitely
what?
kind of acted like that all 3 days that we were,
Yes.
that we fished. So,
But what
but
helped
we
me?
definitely, we showed the guys a great experience. They got to see some really, really cool things. We caught some fish on fly. Everybody caught fish, and I think you wound up catching the most redfish at Redfish Camp, being the out of town guide, coming in and showing us how to do it.
Well, what really helped me out, or calm my nerves, because I was stressed out that first half of that
Yeah, when the
first
fish
day.
cooperate, when the fish are acting like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we all had a group text going. All the guides had a group text. We're like, "What's going on, man? What's going on? Like, why aren't they eating?" Josh was just south of me. I could see him pulling, and I was finding fish, and I could see him circling around. So I knew he was finding fish. And then everyone's being quiet. I'm like, "People aren't catching fish." Then I start texting, and everyone else was like, "Yeah, man, we're finding them, but they're not chewing." There was something. They were acting so strange. But in the afternoons, when that high tide switched and that water started pouring out, they turned on.
yeah,
Now, by then, it was so breezy that we couldn't throw a fly. My guys
right, right,
were capable, but it was much more difficult to sight fish. Like in the
right.
mornings, it was slicked out, they were
Yeah,
tailing, you
yeah,
could see them, you
yeah,
could see them floating. But in the
yeah.
afternoons, when it was ripping, you couldn't see these
Right.
fish.
Yeah, you
So
just
we
had the
switched.
power fish kind of.
Yeah, we switched over to the gold spoons, and you had actually made a suggestion to me and said to go into a specific area, and you told me like I knew where that was, and so I'm just like, well, I don't know where that's at, but I'm gonna guess because you told me what it was, and so
Right,
I found something similar, and I went in there, and I didn't find any fish, and I was like, okay, I gotta find where he's talking about. So I zoomed in on my Raymarine and I'm scrolling around. I'm like, oh, there it is. I found it. So I threw the boat in gear and we idled out away from the rocks and we got to deeper water and we hightailed it in there. But where you told me it was so windy, I had no protection
right,
unless you fished really in that south zone of that area.
right.
And I got in there, got behind some tall structures, some grass, and I found some fish.
Yep,
I found a pattern, and they were there and they were
yep,
chewing. Bobby
yep.
hooked up first, and it hook pulled, and I was like, there's like 7 or 8 more redfish sitting there, and he threw out there and boom, he nailed one. And then we just started. I mean, we started whacking fish,
Yeah.
and we ran out of time. But I listen. You work all day, you don't find any fish, and then you finally find them chewing. You
Hard to
don't
leave
leave.
them.
Hard to leave them.
Yeah.
That's what we ended up doing that first day. Second day, we switched up, and it was exactly the same thing. I went right back to where they were tailing, and they were gone.
Yeah. See, what's funny for me is that first day I wasn't on great tailing fish. A few here and there. Found a few floaters. I didn't have a very good day Friday as far as seeing numbers of redfish, but then Saturday I was on good tailing fish, and
Mm.
I was seeing the numbers, and I had John Scott and Blake. I don't remember his last name, but they were both pretty good fly anglers, and John was able to put a beautiful backhand cast on this redfish that was sitting in a pothole, 25, 26 inches, and we were able to get him a nice redfish on fly that day. So we had a bunch more shots on fly Saturday than we did on Sunday or on Friday, and we were able to make a pretty good day of it.
Yeah, I think Josh caught a red on fly the first day,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got a red on fly the second day.
Right, and Evan did too. Evan
And Evan
put
did.
Bobby on
got
his first redfish on
Yeah.
fly as well. Yeah,
I didn't get any reds on fly. All
yeah,
my reds were caught on gold spoons
right.
in the afternoon. That second day, same deal. I had a game plan. Water was really low, so we hung it back. We caught some trout, did really good with the trout. Water got right. We went right back to where they were tailing the day before.
They
Gone.
weren't there. Yeah,
And so then you go back to okay, all right, where can I go? So then I went back to where we pre-fished because it slicked out in the afternoon.
yeah,
Well, like lunchtime, it slicked out,
right.
and conditions were the same, and the tide was the same as where we pre-fished the week before. And I couldn't get a fish to bite. I couldn't. I was finding fish. Found a lot more
They
black
just wouldn't eat.
drum.
Yeah,
He just would not eat.
right.
And went back to where I went the day before, and they were still there. They just
Yeah,
wanted to be in that zone with that particular high tide water. The high tide was falling out, and man, we
it
wrecked
was
them
your
again.
go-to, man. That little pattern that you found, you really worked well for you though while you
Yeah.
were up there.
The third day, it was so rough. We started later in the day because of the wind blowing and the tide got slowed down with that north wind. I couldn't go there.
Yeah,
I ended up running to an area I hadn't fished, an area you showed me when we were pre-fishing, and I sat in a trough because the water was so low, and I figured, well, I'm going to sit in this trough. Hadn't really fished it before, didn't really know where I was going. But I figured I saw a boat further up, and I was like, I can't get up in there. There's like he was in a mud boat, and I was like, I'm not gonna go up in there. And we sat there and we wrecked the trout, but
nice.
I
Yeah,
couldn't get a redfish
yeah,
that last day.
yeah, yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, overall it was it was a great weekend. I really enjoyed having you come up and see kind of the fishery. I'm glad you got to see a bunch of tails on that first day because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize we have in our area, but you just got to be careful how you go about getting to them and when they're going to do it and all that stuff.
Well, hey, when we get back, more with Captain Jay Carson here on Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Captain Jay Carson with me today. Plug and fly charters up in the Big Bend region of Florida. Jay, it is March. It's springtime. We're in and out of cold fronts. Tell me what's going on. What's your fishing forecast, and what can we expect over the next 6 weeks?
Man, we're gonna have some really phenomenal fishing over the next 6 weeks or so. It's actually really good right now when you get the decent weather days. When the weather stabilizes between the fronts that we're getting, it's just absolutely phenomenal. When we went Friday, when the last decent weather day we had, we kind of did like a split day where we fly fished for sight fish for tail and redfish in the morning. We had good low tide in the morning, and then once the water came up, we switched over to spin gear and just absolutely hammered the trout for 2 hours. It's pretty much every other cast we were catching. Keeper trout, good quality trout too. Not 12, 15-inch fish. All these fish were definitely 16 plus inches. If we had been keeping fish that particular day, we would have had a limit in like 30 minutes.
Wow.
It's been really good.
That's awesome.
So the trout fishing has been my kind of go-to here the last few weeks when I'm struggling with redfish a little bit, or if the redfish bite was off like it was, a little bit that for redfish camp. It's been nice having that trout bite in my back pocket to go and do and go and hammer on those. And I've been catching most of my trout on soft plastic stick baits. So like Mirror Little John,
Okay.
the Slayer Ink Lures stick bait there that they make, and then the other one that I've been throwing is the Saltwater Assassin has just come out with a 4-inch soft plastic stick bait there, and we have
Is
some
this like
tannic water
a
up here.
is this like a sand infused Cinco style stick bait?
It's not really Senko. It's got a flat head and it comes to a point on the tail,
Okay.
and it's just a solid like 4-inch soft plastic
Okay.
that I've been throwing.
Working with
And
like
I've been
a
throwing,
jig
like I said,
head?
the three different ones, and they've all been working about equally well. Just on a 1/8 ounce jig head. I
Okay.
have noticed that they like the white jig head better than some of the other ones. White and chartreuse
Huh.
jig heads have been working the best. On Friday, I one of the guys broke off a jig head, and I was like, "Well, let me just put a red one on there to see." Red jig head. We didn't get a bite on the red jig head. The red
Wow.
and I know I couldn't believe it. So as soon as I switched back to the white jig head, boom, catching fish. So
Hmm.
that was wild. But we have some tannic water, and I like to throw pink. So and that pink really stands out in that tannic water. It's shrimpy looking. So it's been working really
Hmm.
well for the trout.
Cool.
And then our redfish are really kind of in a transition. We were dealing with it some. You could kind of tell they were wanting to come out of it with them eating those spoons for you in the afternoon for redfish camp. As soon as we start getting some water temps in the 68-ish and above consistently, not these fluctuations where it hits 68 for a day and then we get a front come through like we did today, and then it, goes back down into the low 60s or high 50s even. But if we can get that consistent 68 to 70 degree water temps, the gold spoon is going to be the bait to throw along with
Hmm.
some top water for redfish. If you're
Hmm.
just spin fishing, it's going to make a big difference. We're going to start to see some changes on some of the my key changes that I look for this pattern to change. As soon as I start seeing big southern stingrays show up on the flats, I'm
Hmm.
not talking the little skates. I'm
Yeah.
talking the big, 2 foot wide southern stingray showing up in shallow water. And then I'll also see big bull sharks push in shallow. Saw one Friday. So I know that's kind of like that's the first signs that our spring fishing is really going to start kicking off here. So there's some signs
Gotcha.
there that it's about to happen. Got to quit getting some of these fronts, but as soon as we do that, it's gonna take off, and that's gonna consistently get the redfish bite, on a consistent basis better. I've had some really good days on redfish, but here lately it's really been up and down. But if we get that water temp 68, 70 degrees, it's going to be pretty consistent. And those fish are going to fire up. They're going to start feeding on bait. We're going to get some bait to move in, and those fish are going to be a lot more cooperative than what we had to deal with at redfish camp.
Do you ever get any snook in your area?
Occasionally, very southern end of our area, you can definitely find some snook if you put in the time in the heat of summer. Seems to be the best time to do it. In the hottest part, like late July, August, early September, seems to be like when most of our snook are caught. Um, I've been guiding up here for 6 years now. This is my 6th year. We've caught 2 snook on my boat in six years. So I mean, they're pretty rare for it to happen. But again, I don't. Some of the southern areas of where I fish, if I spent more time down there during those dog days in summer, I'd probably have put a few more in the boat. So
Gotcha.
but then so as we kind of transition, see, most of our trout right now are still kind of holding tight to the safety of the creeks in case we do get another, cold front, which you can kind of plan on that happening at some time. They don't want to get too far away from the shelter of those creeks. If the case we do get a significant temperature drop, they can hop right back up in those creeks, find shelter, and survive that cold front. But I'm finding that there are some trout on the flats. There's enough trout out there to catch, but the majority of them are still kind of holding to that structure around those creek mouths and stuff like that. So
Gotcha. What's your go-to for top water?
man, I'm a skitter walk guy. The OG skitter walk. And I throw 2 colors. I throw the silver mullet, and I throw the orange and gold, the gold mullet. Those are the 2 colors that I throw. Sometimes if I'm specifically targeting trout, I will throw a Hedon one knocker in bone or chartreuse, and then if I'm throwing a skitter walk for trout, sometimes I'll do that. That's the chartreuse in that as well. It seems like the trout kind of key in on that chartreuse topwater plug.
You're hitting all the colors I like. You're hitting all the colors I like.
Oh yeah. Those are the best colors, man.
I've got a chartreuse one here, and I keep replacing the hooks on it, and it's this.
It looks like that, yeah.
Yeah. I've got a white one here, and it's missing all the paint. I mean,
all the paint. Yeah.
It
looks like maybe some snook have hit that one a few times.
So this chartreuse one, I was fishing with a good client, Spencer Breedlove. He's up in North Georgia. He was throwing that in a creek, and a snook came up and engulfed it.
Yeah.
And this plug was sideways in the fish's mouth.
Right. He T-boned it.
Yeah. And it was bad.
Yeah.
And he's thrashing. I'm just like, relax. Well, it wore through the leader, popped the leader, and I lost my lure.
Oh.
3 days later.
Same
3 days later. Nope. 3 days later, I found it. And
it had come loose.
He got it out of its mouth, and here it is now.
That's
Lord Fishing Products makes a topwater plug. They have a white, a bone, and a silver. And it's been fantastic. And it's a lot like a Zero Spook. I've been using it a lot lately and crushing it. And I told Ty, I said, man, it's gonna be hard for me to walk away from that skitter walk. That's just that sound. Something about a skitter walk.
It's got the right pitch, man. It sounds good to my ears.
Yeah.
I've thrown, the mirror lure, top dog, she dog, he dog, all of those, and each one has kind of a different, pitch sound that I think have all of them have their purposes, and they all catch fish. And I'm sure some people have, that's maybe their confidence bait, or that's what they have a lot of success with. But for me, when I pull a topwater plug out of my box, it is that skitter walk.
Yeah.
So
the other option, if there's a lot of floating grass, like a lot of debris on the surface, I'm grabbing that DOA PT7.
Yeah.
Now the downside to that bait is also the best thing about that bait. It's a single J hook. Okay. And that J hook rides on top of the bait like a frog. Okay. A frog will have 2 hooks on the top.
Right.
These have a single hook on the top. And the good thing about that is it hits the water and you're working it back just like a topwater plug or walking the dog style. It's not going to get fouled up with grass. But because of that single hook, a lot of times redfish and trout will smack that topwater plug to kill it, not necessarily to eat it. And having these these treble hooks sometimes will do you a favor and will hook the fish and get the fish for you.
Right.
But with that PT7, that fish has to eat it. so that you can get that hook into their mouth and you can hook them.
Right.
So it's a plus because it keeps the grass away, but it's a negative sometimes because they have to really get it in their mouth. But that's another great option if there's a lot of grass around.
For sure.
Let's talk. We've got just a couple minutes. Let's talk rods and reels. What size rod and reel are you using for your inshore stuff?
So in the wintertime, I like a 7 or 7.6 medium light action rod with a 2500 series reel on it. I always use 15-pound braid, no matter if I'm in the wintertime or in the summertime. It doesn't really make a difference to your casting distance or anything like that. I'm throwing smaller weights for the most part in the wintertime. Very rarely ever go over a 1/8 ounce, just because we got so much structure on the bottom that if you throw a 1/4 ounce, my clients or you, whoever's going to be fishing, is going to get stuck on oyster bars. They're going to get stuck on rocks. So you have to fish something that's heavy enough to get a decent sink rate, but not too heavy that'll just go straight to the bottom and find a rock crevice or, get hung on oyster bars. So that's what I like in the wintertime as it warms up and we get some of our bigger fish around, because we can get some big redfish around. I'll pretty much stick to a medium action, 7 foot, I'll still maybe use a 2500, or even a 3000 size reel on that. And,
Jay, if people want to find you, where exactly can they find you on social media?
So I do not have a website. I kind of try to keep a little bit low key, low profile, but you can find me on Facebook, Plug and Fly Charters. You can find me on Instagram, Plug and Fly Charters. You can also reach out, call or text. So my phone number is 850-371-1022. Feel free to shoot me a call or text. So
Love it. Well, hey, listen, if you ever get the opportunity to go fishing with Captain Jay Carson, do it. I'm telling you, the guy is a living legend. Every time I get up there and fish with him, it's an absolute blast. This is the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and we'll see you guys next time.